Welcome everyone to the IAPP web conference, Mastering the Art of AI Governance to Unlock Generative AI Innovation, sponsored today by Security. My name is Selena, a Programming and Speaker Coordinator here at the IAPP, and I'll be your host for today's program. We'll be getting started shortly, but before we do, a few quick details. Participating in today's web conference will automatically provide IAPP certified privacy professionals who are the named registrants with 1 CPE credit. A recording and copy of the slides will be available in your My IAPP account. You can find it under the My Purchases tab and the My Recordings tab within 48 hours of the webinar's end. Please feel free to post any questions that you have for the panelists in the Q&A area at the bottom of your screen. We are looking forward to today's conversation. And with that, I will now hand it over to our panelists to begin the program.
Awesome. Thanks, Elena. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ankur, and I'm part of the product marketing team here at Security. And today we have with us Bethany Singer from National Grid, a leading energy company operating in UK and US. So Bethany is National Grid's Group Chief Privacy Officer. Prior to Grid, Bethany worked in the technology and legal spaces, both at startups and established companies, as well as nonprofits and law firms. Her expertise is in developing framework-based, principle-first, global data privacy programs that promote privacy by design, process automation, and intelligent ethical uses of data. So Bethany is a fellow of information privacy with the International Association of Privacy Professionals and has earned all 6 of their subject matter certifications. She has a Master of Law degree in Public International Law from Leiden University, where she was a Fulbright scholar conducting research on international courts. So hi, Bethany, I'm really excited for our conversation on this very timely topic of AI governance and generative AI innovation.
Hi, Ankur. I'm super excited to be here and to chat with you on this topic. It is certainly top of mind for everybody.
Absolutely, yeah. So in fact, hardly a day goes by that, when we don't hear about some new development in the area of generative AI. In fact, there was a recent report from McKinsey which talked about 2.6 to 4.4 trillion value can be added in a single year, if we use that technology right, keeping all considerations in mind. But to achieve this, what Gartner says, you really need to operationalize AI in a transparent, secure, and trustworthy manner. And in fact, if you do it right, it says that businesses can actually realize 50%, uptake in their business goal attainment. So I'm curious, in the context of generative AI, and how has the perception and strategy around, privacy and compliance shifted from a so-called defensive, compliance-driven world to an offensive, revenue generation world?
So it's a great question, and I think when we started out looking at, let's say, GDPR, for example, the idea really was to kind of get ahead of the fact that data was being treated as more of an asset, and it had been through the way big tech companies and other organizations had been using data, moving away from the whole data subject rights perspective. And I think with GDPR, we moved kind of more towards that idea of, if this data is going to be used as an asset, we have to make sure the person behind the data is protected. That really comes into stark focus with things like generative AI, with any really new technology. And if you're going to be using personal information as an asset, regardless of what the technology is, it needs to be done in that ethical way. But to your point about the return on investment and the value proposition of how generative AI and other AI tools can take these data assets and really help bring a company forward, I don't see it as being particularly different, really, from the privacy space. And I know a lot of people in the technology space would probably disagree with that, but from the privacy perspective, I mean, if you look at Cisco's annual reports on the ROI of privacy, you see anywhere from 1.2 times to 5 times the investment returned for a comprehensive data privacy program. So if you're treating your data in an ethical way, not only is it more usable and more compliant and less risky, but it also actually does have this financial return. I mean, people think of privacy teams as cost centers or legal compliance teams as cost centers, but I like to think of us as being revenue enablement.
It's a great point, Bethany. Totally agree with that. In fact, you mentioned about GDPR and you kind of already touched on it. But I'm curious, as this whole world of, let's say, privacy evolved from GDPR to current AI regulations, so what are some of the key lessons, which can be applied to navigate the future complexities of, let's say, so-called AI privacy and AI governance?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I actually am really enjoying nerding out about with regard to the AI Act and the UK white paper on AI is just how it it ties in so well with not just GDPR, but also with things like ISO 27701, or even to some extent the newish NIST privacy framework 1.0, where it is this principle forward approach. And one of the things that I mentioned it in the last question, but privacy laws are technology neutral. And so, regardless of what tools you're using, the privacy principles remain consistent. And with certain tools, obviously, it's going to be harder. For things like a generative AI tool, or really any kind of large learning model, large language model, where you are inputting all of this data and training all of this data and creating this model. I mean, how do you, comply with data subject access requests? How do you comply with right to erasure requests? So it's challenging to get to that point. But in terms of the way that the laws are evolving and the frameworks are evolving, they sort of in parallel with each other. Transparency, that's kind of a key one. In the EU AI Act, this kind of overarching ban, but with exceptions for the critical risk AI tools, that kind of aligns with Article 9 GDPR and the prohibition on processing special category data unless it falls into one of the listed exceptions. And so it seems to me that these things they go hand in hand. And from that AI perspective in particular, it almost, I don't want to say it builds off of GDPR, because I don't think that's the exact right way to put it. But GDPR, like I said, technology neutral, but the AI Act and other rules around it kind of, I think, add some clarity to how privacy protections can be better applied within these specific technologies.
Wow, that's pretty insightful. So I think essentially what you are saying is, whether it's the data privacy regulations or AI regulations, AI governance related regulations, at the end of the day, they sort of translate into various obligations, for different teams, security teams, governance team, privacy teams. And with AI regulations now, there is even more clarity, around how we should keep those obligations in mind as we deploy the technology to generate, revenue or support the business. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think these things go hand in hand. And one of the critiques within data privacy law, that kind of led to the creation of GDPR was, the directive came from 1995. How does the law keep up with the pace of technology? That's going to be an ongoing concern. But I think new regulations in the AI space, when you pair it with privacy law, they really work well together. But that actually kind of leads me to a question. So maybe we can sort of switch roles here for a second. So
Sure.
given that the pace of this technology is rapidly increasing, and there are concerns, like we've talked about gaps in regulation, oversight, control. So what do you see as problems or blind spots that could lead to unregulated or uncontrolled AI?
Absolutely, Bethany. In fact, we are having those conversations with our customers almost on weekly and daily basis. So customers have many unanswered questions, as you can see on the slides. And we can start with, like, first question is really, which AI models are currently active in my organization? Either deployed directly by my developers, my data engineers. So they could be open source models like ChatGPT, or they could be custom models like I integrated my data into the existing models and built something. Or it could be provided via my SaaS applications, SaaS vendors, like Salesforce and Slack. Most of the SaaS vendors are using some sort of AI today. So if I have no visibility into my AI systems, AI landscape, it may lead to the proliferation of so-called shadow AI. And this proliferation of shadow AI, threatens security, ethics, and compliance in my organization. Because unless I know what's there, how can I address any risks associated with that? And then the other questions, what sort of blind spots are, what is the risk rating of those AI models? Because lack of awareness around the model risks, as you mentioned, like things like malicious use, toxicity, hallucinatory responses, bias, and discrimination, So you need to have sort of, that sort of benchmarking for those models. Either it's available through third party or maybe self-reported by vendors, but you need to have that context, risk context around those models. And then which security controls are enabled for my AI models, So models, in fact, it's like what is an AI model? So AI model is essentially similar to data systems, with vast compressed information that throws some outputs, trained on the valuable data, whether the data is internal data or external data. So the question is, what security controls can I apply within or around these models so that AI models are not open to manipulation, not open to data leakage and malicious attacks? So as you rightly pointed out, some of the risks were there in the data privacy world also, but in this AI world and the Gen AI world, the nature of risk is even, sort of has more snowballing effect because all these models have memory like a human brain. So once something goes in, it stays there, sort of forever, unless we do it right. And then the next question or the blind spot is like, what controls are there on the prompts, agents, and assistant side, where you are deploying that technology to enable your internal audience or your customers. So unguarded prompts, agents, and assistants open the door to harmful interactions, threatening user safety and ethical principles. In fact, it's crucial to understand how the data generated by these models is being utilized, whether you share it in a Slack channel or you integrate it into a website as a chatbot. So moreover, these agents, while serving as channels for legitimate queries, of course, but they can also, pretty quickly become potential pathways for new types of attacks on AI systems. And at the end of the day, of course, it's about you want to comply with those, ever evolving AI regulatory landscape. So are my AI models compliant with global regulations? Things like NIST AI risk management framework. So NIST is National Institute of Standards and Technology, in case you don't know, and the EU AI Act, as Bethany, you mentioned, and many other regulations in countries like Canada, China, Brazil, and Singapore. I think that's another thing which we are seeing, that in the past, maybe there were few geographies, which were more concerned about it. But now when it came to AI and more, usage of AI in our day-to-day life, so countries across the world are coming up with their regulations, and it becomes even more important. So yeah, in fact, if you go to the next slide, Melissa, I would also like to cover sort of, what's the so what of it. I think that's really important. So if you don't answer those questions, what can happen? So the impact of uncontrolled AI is significant and more severe than one might imagine, actually. So if you see this, lately the Dutch Prime Minister and his entire cabinet, if you're tracking the news, had to quit because of an algorithm which unfairly accused the population of welfare fraud. And that was not good. A leading consumer electronics company banned ChatGPT among its employees after a sensitive code leak happened from the engineering team, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, uncontrolled or unregulated AI is a recipe for disaster, and it leads to financial loss, it leads to reputational damage, and flawed business decisions at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very risky to keep this in an uncontrolled state. So do you have tips, ideas? How do you take control of your AI landscape?
Absolutely, yeah. So we can look at the AI governance as a 5-step approach, as we see right now, as we have those conversations with our customers. So step 1 is to really uncover, or discover those models, AI models, and then catalog them, whether they are in use, across your public clouds or private clouds and in SaaS applications. So ultimately, you want to gain full transparency into your AI systems and break down all the walls, around shadow AI. So once you have that sort of visibility in step 2, you evaluate risks related to each AI model. Things like bias and discrimination and hallucination, all those ratings, and then classify your AI models in accordance with global regulations. Step 3 is really about connecting. So let's say a high risk model. So you do some sort of ranking in step 2, which model is high risk from the business use case perspective, and then you get more context around that AI model, like what are the data sources which are feeding data to that model? How is that data processed, throughout the AI life cycle? What are the potential risks? What are the compliance obligations? So you do that sort of, continuous data plus AI mapping and achieve clarity over those things. And so far, like till step 3, if you see, it's all about visibility, and then now it's about once you know what's happening, like those potential vulnerability points in data and AI flow. In step 4, you establish controls for sensitive data in both model inputs and outputs. and safeguard your technology, against misuse and vulnerabilities by constructing adequate protection around these AI models and interaction systems. And lastly, you check compliance with global AI standards, such as NIST AI RMF, EU AI Act, and more than 20 other regulations. So I think by thoughtfully implementing these 5 steps, enterprises can foster robust AI governance and convert their so-called AI obligations into tremendous business growth opportunities, while taking care of all the human and social concerns. So yeah, maybe Selena, this is the time for the poll, I believe. So I think it would be
I'm
fantastic
excited
if you can
about
take a
this one
minute.
to see how people answer this one.
It's kind of equally splitting, huh?
Responses are flying in. Love that.
Wow. What's your reaction, Bethany, so far?
I think it's really interesting. It's pretty much what I expected, although I'm a little surprised at the number of unsure / not applicable. 14%, established and fully implemented comprehensive AI governance policies and controls. That is really impressive. I see that
Indeed.
we're almost evenly divided, 29% to 33% between the second and third answers, developed but not implemented or lacking dedicated AI policies and procedures. And so what that says is that we're kind of regardless of where you are, unless you're in that 14%, there's at least some kind of maturing that needs to happen. What are your thoughts, Ankur?
Yeah, so I was also thinking about the industry angle here. Do you think like there could be some industries, let's say healthcare or pharma, where it is even, more like stringent rules we have and we have to comply as fast as possible. So those kind of angles could also be there. But I think it's really coming from I think the leadership mindset, I think sitting at the top in the organizations, how quickly they want to do that. So, but I think definitely I want see the 14% number is pretty impressive, but it's glad to see that it's already happening, and many others need to catch up.
But you know what I'm seeing here also is kind of encouraging because you're seeing that there really is attention to it, even if you lack dedicated AI policies and procedures. There is still awareness. I mean, the fact that under 25% are unsure, not applicable, that's actually really impressive, given how quick moving that this has happened in and how quickly it's come to the fore in so many people's minds. You know, I've worked in a lot of different industries, and some are more fast moving than others. But it sort of seems like there's almost this kind of global prioritization on, let's get to the generative AI and let's get the governance in place for it.
Yeah, that's great. No, I think it's good. I'm sure this statistics will change significantly in 2024, and for all for good. So thank you all for sharing these results. I think we'll continue the conversation with Bethany here. So Bethany, my next question, AI governance is more than just privacy, as you mentioned in the beginning. And it requires a strong collaboration, with other teams such as data security, data governance, and lines of business, perhaps. So how do you foster a collaborative environment between these teams, perhaps at national grid or in your previous jobs, to jointly harness and govern AI? Are there any case studies or examples you can share with us?
Sure. So cross-functional collaboration when it comes to AI governance, the importance of that cannot be overstated. Like you mentioned, there are stakeholders across the board that need to be involved in the governance process. It's also really critical that the users of the technology be involved in this. We can't just go forward with rules, regulations, processes, and procedures that don't take into account the needs of the stakeholders. Following the policy, following the processes has to be the easiest method. Otherwise, or at least the method that makes the most sense. Otherwise, people will find ways to go around it. So I can give an example of National Grid. When ChatGPT took the world by storm last year, we thought, all right, well, we are critical infrastructure. We have to make sure that we are very appropriately managing risks. We have to be super careful with this, and blanket ban across the board, blocked anything GPT, blocked the term AI. I couldn't access the security.ai website for a while. That's not a joke, because it had AI in the URL. So we started out at that kind of high level of We're going to be risk averse to all of this, but we know that people want to use the tooling. We know that people have been before it was blocked, and that we have to make sure that they can use this in a way, or use a tool or some type of tool in a way that gives them what they need, while also protecting the company and protecting, excuse me, our customers.